Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guests introduce themselves to our listeners and viewers at home. First, we have Mr. Andrew Gillsmith.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Andrew Gillsmith. I'm a science fiction author living in St. Louis. Written a few books, a few series. Probably the biggest one is Our Lady of the Artilex.
Okay. Next, we have Mr. John James.
Hi, John James. I'm the editor and founder of Incensepunk and a polymath with way too many hobbies to get good at any of them.
Okay. I mean, hobbies are a good thing, though. They're generally an excuse to get poor.
Yep, I take full advantage of that excuse.
All right, last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Yuval Kordov. I probably butchered that, but can you...
No, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Hey, guys, I'm Yuval. I'm living in dystopian Canada. I am also a science fiction author. Dark Legacies is my main series. And I do the developmental editing for Incensepunk submissions.
All right. And then the next part of the introduction, dear listeners, how we found them. And this was actually recommended to us by some of our listeners over there on the Twitters, X, Twix, whatever you want to call it. They recommended the topic, so I reached out, and the rest, as they say, is history. But before we get started, gentlemen, we do have to do the religion question. Are you guys ready for this?
Let's have it.
All right. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly? Andrew.
I'm a Star Wars guy. I enjoy Star Trek. I like Star Trek, and I liked Firefly. But I mean, come on, one season. I mean, how
Thank God it was only one season. Can you imagine what would have happened if that dragged on?
It
was amazing.
It was great. It was a great for one season. But no, I'm a Star Wars guy, unapologetically.
Yeah, unfortunately, Firefly was on Fox Entertainment, where good shows go to die. So they say Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. Fox Entertainment is the graveyards of excellent IPs.
Mm-hmm.
Can I
seriously?
Can I twist the question slightly and say that
sure.
what I really love though was The Expanse.
Okay, that was the essay Corey something, right?
Yeah, essay Corey started on Sci-Fi and then got saved temporarily by Amazon.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
That is a very long book series.
Mm-hmm. And Amazon actually did a good job with it for once.
They did. Yeah, it was great. It's a terrific series.
I love seeing them use the guns in space doing the little spiral when they were shooting those rounds for missile defense. It was glorious to see what technology could give us.
Yeah.
All right, next we have Mr. John James, Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
I enjoy Star Wars more, but I respect Star Trek more. And I probably like it theoretically I like it better, but it's just got a lot less media to go on. And then I don't know, that's not really fair. It's got hours of seasons, but most of them are very old.
There's also some of the revitalized shows. There are several novelizations in the Star Trek world.
Yeah. I have watched all of the new series. I have thoughts. Actually, I haven't watched all of Discovery. I watched some of Discovery. You can probably figure out my thoughts there. I watched all the other ones, though.
Yeah, my problem with Star Trek is it's a little too utopian. It's almost like they don't understand humanity. Like this idea you're going to do things just because you're nice people and not for money, and money doesn't exist in this future. I'm like, yeah, really?
I mean, that's the point. We'll talk about that later, because that's actually part of the Incensepunk thing, too, is this idea of like looking towards a hopeful future in opposition to the Game of Thronesification of science fiction in general and fantasy.
I mean, I'm not for nihilism, but I definitely think realism is not the same thing.
I mean, I don't think Star Trek would ever claim to be realism.
Well, I mean, they've invented several tech has been inspired by them that was on their show and became real later. So
true.
I mean, it was somewhat predictive in that sense.
So maybe Utopia's next.
I won't hold my breath.
Yeah, I've met too many people to buy into that idea that we're just going to do things out of the goodness of our heart. So, all right, Mr. Yuval, Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
No, there's no competition. It's Star Trek all the way. Star Trek up until the end of Enterprise. New Trek doesn't exist. And Firefly was amazing and wonderful, and I loved it. But sometimes it's good when things end early.
I liked Enterprise. The dog was awesome. I liked was it Scott Bakula, that everything in Star Trek was always sleek and rounded, and definitely that futuristic. I liked that they weren't there yet with the Enterprise, so things were boxier and looked more like they were kind of figuring it out as they go. It felt more realistic in the evolution of technology from looking backwards from where they were.
Yeah.
So, all right, and because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia. Andrew.
I may shock my fellow Incensepunkers on this, but Game of Thrones on those three. I mean, Wheel of Time. I mean, to be honest with you, I've never read Wheel of Time.
Okay.
So I got to scratch that one off the list right away. I love C.S. Lewis. Love C.S. Lewis. Narnia is probably my least favorite material from him.
Oh, you're gonna get so many hate tweets.
I know. I just lost like 80% of my readership, and also invalidated my BookBub ads. all in one fell swoop.
What was your favorite C.S. Lewis work then?
The Screw Tape Letters.
Yes,
definitely. In fact, my wife and I just saw a play of the Screw Tape Letters. It was phenomenal. It was really, really well done. Yeah.
It's definitely an evocative title, so he got that going for him.
Yeah,
that is a piece of serious Christian artwork. Like, there's nothing else like it.
Okay, John, Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia?
I have to go with Narnia because it's the only one of those three that I've actually read. But I kind of am with Andrew. I like Narnia for kids, and there's a lot of emotional depth to it, and even a little bit of theological depth to it. But like the world building is so nonsensical, it kind of loses me. It's like the whole series was inspired by him having this vision of a satyr in a scarf leaning against a lamppost, and he wrote the entire thing based on that vision. And the vision, it happens when she first goes to Narnia, but it doesn't even make any sense in Narnia. There's no other lampposts or other modern technology in the whole series. So it's like, what? He's pulling in Greek gods and Father Christmas and all this stuff. It's fun, but loses me.
Can I jump in with something on this, actually, just because I just saw this play, and after the play, there was a C.S. Lewis expert from a regional university who was there, and she came out and did a little talk, and then they took Q&A. And so I raised my hand. I said, what did C.S. Lewis think of basically his friend's fiction? And she's like, that's a complicated question. Apparently, I guess Lewis dedicated the Screw Tape Letters to Tolkien. But Tolkien, in like his typical sort of irascible fashion, a fan wrote him a letter years later and was like, what do you think of the Screw Tape Letters? And his response was, I try not to. Or something to that effect.
They had a lot of choice quotes about each other for people who seemed to be as close of friends as they were. Yeah.
Don't worry, I'm not saying things like that about you guys in letters to my family. I promise.
I mean, with friends like that.
I think they helped each other. They elevated each other's art. I'd say that much for their friendship.
Yeah, normally we would ask when we first started doing the religion questions for the fantasy, we did ask the Tolkien instead of Narnia, but it was so unfair that it won every time that it left no room for discussion.
Exactly.
Right? And so we had to switch it up, and I was trying to just find something that's almost as iconic. And the other criteria, we try to find things that have been converted to many mediums, so screen, comic, graphic novel, game, whatever, so we can meet our audience where they are as far as how they engage with speculative fiction. but it definitely limits because some of the best stuff that you might love is only in book. It never even, never got the graphic novel or the movie or whatever. So, Yuval, I don't want to forget people, and I do that sometimes. Did I ask you the fantasy religion question?
No. Is this so speaking of mediums, is this in the book format or show format, or does it matter?
Doesn't matter. We let the guest who's answering decide.
Well, I'll go left field then, and I'll pick Dragonlance instead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's obviously not as admired from a literary perspective as the others, but or at least C.S. Lewis. But it's what I grew up with. I mean, I think I started reading Chronicles when I was 14, and there was no looking back. So
my daughter just started those.
Nice.
If you read the Dragonlance, did you also read the Lone Wolf Choose Your Own Adventure books? Sort of in the same vein.
I read so many fighting fantasy, choose your own adventure, and all the different flavors of those books growing up. I probably did, but I mean, we're talking like decades in the past. I mean, I don't remember what I had for breakfast today. So
right,
definitely food. We can go with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the crying shames of adulthood is we stop asking each other the important questions. So by popular demand of our audience, we are bringing those questions back. So Andrew, what's your favorite dinosaur?
Stegosaurus. I just like the word. I love the word Stegosaurus, and I think it's such a ridiculous animal. I actually try to work like a reference to a Stegosaurus in some of my books as often as I can, just because it's beautifully ridiculous.
Stegosaurus is a popular one, but it was also the one that's in a lot of the kids' media when it comes to dinosaurs. That one, the Triceratops and T-Rex are in a lot of the places where you're going to see dinosaurs on the screen or in the book.
He's saying your answer is basic, Andrew.
Oh, totally. Well, I also really like the I don't know how to pronounce it, Ankylosaurus.
Yeah, he's a good one.
It's basically like the thing that's like a giant turtle with spikes and a morning star for a tail.
Excellent choice also. All right. John, favorite dinosaur?
The Reasanosaurus, easy. He's like the Wolverine of dinosaurs. Big old 4-foot long claws on its fingers. Totally. He was like, I grew up in the 90s. He was known, but not like in all the books. I was really into dinosaurs as a kid. But like, I would have thought that some 90s dude made him up the first time I saw this dinosaur. He looks like the most 90s, like, we need a Wolverine version of T-Rex. Come on, what do you got?
Okay. Yuval.
Yeah, my answer is going to sound generic, but it's not for a generic reason. So it would be T-Rex, but only because when I was younger and fresher and I used to go dancing all the time, I was told that I danced like a T-Rex because my arms are always kind of tucked up like this.
I go big on the weekend. I go T-Rex.
Got that like Michael Jackson in Thriller.
Yeah, exactly. That was me basically. Yeah.
I can relate to that. When I was learning to march in the Army, I did have a drill sergeant once tell me I marched like a pregnant dinosaur with trick knees. I don't know if that was insulting me or the dinosaur. I have jury's still out. Okay, so lastly, we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. We are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. So, coffee or tea, and how do you take it, Andrew?
I like both, but I got to go coffee, straight up black.
Okay, John.
I like coffee better, but it has too much caffeine and gives me migraines, so I've switched. Well, first I stopped drinking at all, but now I couldn't handle it, and I'm drinking tea, Irish style, with a little cream and a little sugar.
Oh, I thought Irish style might involve a little something else.
Yeah, that's what I was going to think. Or I was going to ask, but
yeah, the little Baileys every morning. That's how I wake up.
Whatever gets you going in the morning, right? We don't judge.
Yeah.
All right, and Yuval.
Coffee black. There's no other coffee.
So you guys like your coffee strong and dark, or medium, or light?
No, there's only black. I mean, the thicker it is, the more coffee like it is. Otherwise, you're basically getting into flavored water territory.
So strong enough to hold the spoon up. Got it.
I'm purely in it for the addictive drug aspect. Like the caffeine, like I don't really care that much as long as I get the caffeine. So I'll take it however.
Yeah, like John, I stopped. I was off coffee just recently for about 6 weeks, and just for some gut stuff. And I restarted a couple of days ago, and I feel like a new human being. Like it is very much a drug and a very good one. So
I wish I could take it. I miss it so much.
Yeah. Have you tried any substitutes like chicory or decaf?
I did chicory for a while. It's okay iced, but it leaves a weird aftertaste. I don't know. A decaf is just, why bother?
Yeah.
Just reminds you what you're missing, you know?
This is a family podcast, but can I recommend nicotine?
Where I thought you were going.
Sure. I used to smoke, so I understand. Smoke those cigars like a chimney. Not anymore though, because I value my health, dear listener. And don't you start; it's bad for you.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very bad.
Wacko is wacko if you're a teen.
Yeah. Absolutely. There you go. You remember Nancy Reagan? Just say no. Wait, did you guys have the Just Say No stuff in Canada?
I think we did. Pretty sure we did.
You guys have like rotting organs plastered on every pack.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Where we tend to be the nanniest of nanny states, so I'm sure we did.
That's interesting. I don't know that it would have worked though. The picture on the pack. I think the people that were smoking were smart enough to know they were doing bad things. They just didn't care.
And the first time I went to Canada, I bought it because of I didn't smoke it, but I had to have the black lungs all over.
Yeah. So the obviously I started smoking before I was 18. Don't do that at home, kids. And I remember when I was 18 and I could finally do it legally, I went out and bought them and they didn't card me. And I'm like, wait, you're supposed to ask now that it's legal.
Right.
They didn't. I was disappointed. It wasn't as cool when you're not sneaking it and they don't care.
Right.
All right. Did you guys ever get into the cigars then, Andrew? Did you ever, or is it just straight cigarettes?
No, cigars are just too much. There's the smell, the lingering, the smoke, and all that stuff. I have so many. I could get into my whole relationship to nicotine and take up the whole podcast. So I'm just going to stop. I'm going to cut myself off before I even get into it. But
you're going to quit cold turkey, as it were. Okay,
a little bit.
I do a little pipe. I like pipe.
I love a pipe.
Obliterates your taste buds for the next week, but it smells great and it feels good. And once a month or so, hit it out.
Do you have the Gandalf pipe, or you got, what is it? The who was it? Patton that had the corncob pipe?
Mine's just a normal, like stubby mahogany. It's like the most normal basic of pipes. I got it when I was in college it was the cheapest pipe they had that wasn't the corncob, basically.
Do you do it with the tweed jacket with the leather little patches on your elbow, just to be classy?
I cannot see
tweed jacket smell.
So John's not the classy tweed jacket with a leather shoulder and
not that type anymore. No, I have been in the past.
All right. So normally, dear listener, we would not air the commercial this early, but I won't want to interrupt them once they get started on Incensepunk, because when our listeners recommended it, it sounded like nothing I had heard before. So I figured it would be a fun episode for you, which is why we're airing it so quickly after recording it and as a bonus episode. So for a second, we're going to pause for a moment and we're going to shamelessly shill for the man.
Van, I know this is hard for you to accept or even believe, but you're not imagining this. You're not going crazy. Your grandfather believed right down to the core of his being in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves.
You expect me to believe that my grandfather was a star-faring soldier?
I can prove it to you.
And how are you going to do that?
By taking you for a flight. Whenever you're ready, Van.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. Thank you, Cheney, because I've been spending way too much money on your variant publications. You've been stealing all of my profits because I buy your stupid books. I feel like I ought to get like a wing in the Cheney Mansion at this point named in honor of me because I spent so much dang money buying his books.
So is that a like a film adaptation?
No, Podium Entertainment, well, it used to be Podium Publishing, made a commercial, which is what you saw for the books and the audiobooks. But it's a literary series. It's not on anything but print and audio.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I mean, Jane Chaney has done phenomenally.
He's a machine.
Well.
He's like a Spyborg because I don't think he sleeps.
Phenomenally well, and he's had a lot of imitators with that concept. I've noticed.
Yeah, I mean, if he hadn't just popped out he didn't pop it out. If he hadn't just reproduced, I might have wondered if he was all robot because I really don't think he sleeps. But he's our favorite soulless ginger. Well, one of our favorite soulless gingers. I will say, growing up in the South, I've been in a lot of barns and I've yet to find a spaceship or anything cool. And now I feel disappointed. So I
keep looking.
Have you guys ever saw that show? Was it Barn Hunters that was on History Channel for a while? I never went and saw any of that cool stuff in there. It was always just trash and just nothing
rusty
cool.
Tractors.
Yeah, none of them worth $1. Not even a scrap metal. All right, so we came here to talk about Incensepunk, and for those of us who don't know what that is, can you kind of describe the concept and like how it came to be? And anybody can answer.
Yeah, Incense. Yeah, sorry. Anyone else, feel free to hop in, but I started it, so I'll start the answer. So yeah, Incensepunk is a sci-fi micro genre that's focused on science fiction that incorporates elements of real world faith. So it's most of what we've published so far has been Christian, but we're open to other faiths with a strong tradition. We've got some submissions from we've got some Jewish submissions, and Yuval's books are Jewish. Most of them, one of them's Catholic, and Yuval himself is Jewish. I'll let him talk about that. We got some. We've been looking at some Muslim ones. We're super interested in other faiths as well, but most of what we've done so far is Christian, just because circles we swim in. But yeah, the inspiration was basically, actually, if you go to the website, there's this image that you posted or that you asked me about earlier on one of the articles by an artist called Max Bejulenko. And that image is actually what started the whole thing. It got posted to Twitter and shared around the circles I was in. And I was like, dude, this needs to be a thing. It's like the cyberpunk setting, gritty Middle Eastern setting. There's like in the background an icon of Christ, like all decrepit mosaic crumbling, guys walking around in the foreground with like VR visors and like floating ships floating overhead and stuff. And I'm like, cyberpunk Catholic, like where's the future? Where's faith in the science in the future? Like we don't see that represented much in science fiction, real world faiths. They make up religions a lot of times, or there's the classic foil of the church's evil, manipulative group trying to control everyone, a la Dune or whatever. But that's basically been the inspiration. Is like, I want this to be a thing, and apparently it's not.
Okay. Andrew, Yuval, do you have anything you want to add about what Incensepunk is?
And I think John covered it pretty good as the founder of actual incensepunk.com. But I think that's really the spirit of it is, we've all read if we think about all the science fiction we've read, there's certainly a tendency towards nihilism or very, very unrealistic kind of end games that are just transhumanist, right? It's like, oh, okay, everybody's just uploaded into computers and we're all sending and blah blah blah, and it's all very very empty and hollow and unrealistic. So as John said, it's really nice to think about and to write about futures, and not necessarily bright futures. I mean, they're any kind of speculative future that where religion is front and center, as it tends to be in all of human existence.
Yeah, I mean, I think John and Yuval both covered it really well. To me, what I love about them, there are many things that I love about the genre and the aesthetics that John talked about, which was kind of the genesis, I think, for him and for his project, is a big part of it. But I think about the going back to Tolkien. Tolkien has that famous quote where he says, "I cordially dislike allegory in all of its forms." As he was asked, "Is the Lord of the Rings just an allegory for World War I?" I cordially dislike preachiness in all of its forms, whether that's coming from a religious perspective or an irreligious perspective. It's a turnoff. And I think one of the defining characteristics of Incensepunk, I think, is there is an absence of preachiness. It just sort of takes the existence of religion as a human phenomenon, human institution, for granted. It has always been a part of the human experience, and it probably always will be. And if we're dealing with realistic futures, probably ought to have it in there.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reason people avoid or they just make up their own religions in fiction is it's seen as safer, because you don't want to offend. And the presumption, and I don't think it's as true as it used to be, is that if you were religious, you were stuffy, and thus you didn't like entertainment. They just assumed everyone was sort of puritanical Puritans who didn't know how to have fun.
Yeah.
And maybe there was a period in the past where that was true. I mean, in the 80s, they had the Satanic Panic with all things, gaming related. But I don't think that was a lot of people. I just think it was a very loud minority. And so I think the reason they ignore religion is just seems safer.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, I think that is a big part of it. The question is, why is it safer? I mean, I think that's we could get down a rabbit hole on that pretty fast. I think the publishing industry doesn't want to hear stories like that.
I think the publishing industry is very much so a product of an isolated echo chamber in the Northeast waspy areas of America, because that's where all the publishing is. And so they don't have their pulse on what a lot of readers want. They publish for each other more than anything. And then for years it was, you'll take it and you'll like it. I do think that indie publishing in general has sort of freed people up to say, wait, reading doesn't have to suck. I can have fun with these books. And so you're seeing a resurgence. And those people were probably already reading. They just were reading the same old books that had been out for a while. I don't say that derogatory, but like people reading Lord of the Rings for the 100th time. And now suddenly they're giving options that sort of fill that niche for them. And that was why it was avoided. And now that there is no gatekeeper in that respect, people are free to do the most niche things you can think of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, my books are about as niche as they get. They're niches within niches, and I love it. And the people who love it also love it, right? I mean, it's not going to be for everybody, nor should it be, right? And there's certainly like a it's not like self-publishing is new, but it feels like we're truly on the cusp of, I think, self-publishing overtaking traditional publishing, just because traditional publishing produces what traditional publishing produces.
I think all the creative energy is with the indies. I mean, to me, there's huge variation in quality, right? Of course, in the indie publishing world, but there's huge variation in the traditional world too. I mean, I read some terrible, trad published genre fiction, but there's a boldness and a fearlessness and just kind of a desire to explore ideas authentically in indie world that you just don't. I don't think. I mean, maybe it's there in trad pub, but whoever the gatekeepers are, they're not letting it through.
I think largely part of that is the cost of overhead. So a lot of it, like you said, they're up in unionized areas of the Northeast of America. So the overhead is going to be high. They've got buildings to maintain, staff to pay, from building maintenance all the way up. Whereas indie, you have your computer you've got to get, source a cover, pay an editor, and write the words. And so your ROI is a lot lower. So for you, 10,000 salesmen, I can make a living at 10,000 sales a book. That doesn't even cover their operating costs for a book over at Bain or Tor or whatever. I know Bain is a little bit better positioned because they're in North Carolina, so they don't have some of that legacy overhead, but their overhead is still more than yours or or mine or any other indie, which I think gives you room to be creative in ways they don't have the luxury of.
One of the things that I'm going to put John on the spot here maybe a little bit, and I'm sorry, John, but one of the things John has talked about, like in our private conversations, which are ongoing constantly, like the three of us are online, like on X, literally, it's like the world's longest DM. But this idea of like the Tor voice,
Tor.com. You got to be precise with these because they're different.
Right. Also, we don't want to get sued, but
Tor.com can sue us, but not real Tor.
The voice of these books that are coming out it's could be regurgitated out of a large language model. I mean, it's all the same, obnoxious, snarky, teenager, angsty, shallow, stupid nonsense.
Trad publishing seems to be very slow moving and very they don't seem to want to look for the next big thing all that much, as they want to keep riding the wave they're already on. And you see this right now, the big thing is romantasy. And so whenever someone gets an agent, they're asked, hey, can you write a romantasy? That's the big thing right now. And it's yeah, there's a huge romantasy series right now, but why isn't anyone trying to figure out what the next series is and trying to pursue those? This wave is only going to last so long. Everyone's already doing it. The market's got to be pretty saturated. I was at the bookstore. I saw how many end caps there were.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing is at least with novels, they don't happen overnight, right? Like it takes one novel for some authors can take months. And so by the time you get it done and edited and a series ready, you might miss the wave. So if you're going to spend your time as a creative, spend it on something you want to write. I mean, I feel lucky the things I want to write are also commercially viable. I'm not writing underwater basket weaving, whatever. That's just not my niche.
Religious science fiction.
But I think religious science fiction is starting to become more of a thing. I think you're seeing I don't want to say renaissance of religion, but you're starting to see more people in an uncertain world looking for answers. Some of that is in the church. And so it kind of follows logically that you're going to see some of that reflected in fiction.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we agree. That's kind of the premise of the whole thing is, I've talked to people for the last few years since I started thinking of this thing, and there's an appetite for it. There's a market for it. We're seeing our site take off. We've only been around for about 6 months, but we're getting attention and people are interested in what we're doing. Even non-religious people. We've gotten a number of subs from non-religious people who just find religion itself interesting and something that they want to be able to write with.
It's an amazing palette to work with, right? It's it's infinitely interesting.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I mean, I've certainly written religious characters, although generally I make up religion so I can pick the cool parts of all of them. But the more you study each individual religion, regardless of what it is, you realize it's not that the other ones didn't have the cool stuff. You just didn't know about it, right? So I think I could foresee seeing more people writing, instead of making up religions, using existing ones. Although, like I said, it's the presumption is if you get it wrong, they're going to try to cancel you or whatever.
I feel like that's not. I don't know. I feel like people are less. I don't know. I feel like the cancel wave is dying down on that kind of stuff.
I think so too.
It's with the internet and the attention span and everything, it's how much do you really get canceled? How many times has J.K. Rowling been canceled? She gets canceled every week, and she's still making billions on her franchise.
I don't understand how the generation that grew up on Beavis and Butthead and Ren and Stimpy and all of that, how they are so easily offended, which is, my peers. But
Have
They
you
just
read
never made sense to
Between
me.
Two Fires? I forget the author, but it's a fantasy book. It's like
Right.
a kind of grimdark fantasy. But I believe the author is non-religious, but it's like super grimdark. But the main character is like a Catholic knight or a former. He's like been excommunicated or something. But he's like ends up traveling, kind of the Hound and Arya kind of situation. He's traveling with this girl through circumstance, and she's like basically a Catholic saint in the making, super religious and like sees visions of the saints and everything. And I think the book does an amazing job of utilizing Christianity without being preachy or anything like that. You know, it's like it's part of the world. It takes place in during the Black Plague, but in this setting, the Black Plague is like also accompanied by like demons coming to Earth and stuff.
Okay.
So it's like super dark, like Warhammer 40K levels of gore and violence and everything, but it's got this core of like, you know, in the place we're setting it in, we're taking the demons seriously. That's a commonplace in sci-fi and fantasy for demons to be real. Why not also take the other side a little bit? It creates an interesting story. It lets us take the setting that the people lived in and take it seriously instead of having to, you know, snicker behind our hand for half the book about the stupid religion these dumb yokels believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to do cool stuff like meet with saints who are impaled with arrows, who can repel the demons and save you from death and all this stuff. Like, it was popular at the time for a reason, and what people think is cool hasn't really changed that much throughout human history, in my opinion.
Look, I agree with all of that, and I would also say that sci-fi is as a genre as a whole, right? I mean, and these are sweeping generalizations that, you know, that obviously have plenty of counter examples, but you know, it's in the cul-de-sac of materialism, of physicalism, let's call it. That is an inherent assumption that underlies 90 to 95% of the science fiction that you're going to find on bookshelves. Well, guess what? The best science today is saying that physicalism is not viable, right? I mean, there's the great, couple of great neuroscientist who's doing some of the most fascinating work on this stuff in the world, named Donald Hoffman. And, he's got these interviews with astrophysicists who say space-time is doomed, right? I mean, and what they mean by that is space-time as like the ultimate substrate of reality, as like the base layer from which everything else emerges, is a ridiculous concept that's not supported by the science. Okay.
It's interesting, yeah.
Like, if you're in sci-fi and you're not talking about that, and you're assuming that everything is, atoms and quarks and muons until you get to the Planck length, and then it's big mystery and we have no idea. All right. I mean, I think you're probably not telling the most interesting stories.
The arguments for dark matter are very similar to the arguments for God. You have to take it's something you can't observe, can't be observed, but you can deduce its existence by the way matter in the universe exists. I've heard that one before.
Fascinating.
Now, Incensepunk doesn't have to just be sci-fi. Does fantasy qualify as that for you guys?
For our magazine, it's explicitly sci-fi. People using the label can do what they want with it. We're not in control of the language or anything, but I know there's some fantasy authors who've used it, and then there's some who are playing with a sister genre, we're calling it, of Sword and Censor, as a play on like Sword and Sorcery, to play off of Incensepunk as a fantasy equivalent.
But it really is, really our focus is on the speculative fiction, right? Is the future visions, near to extremely distant, and what is, what are the journeys that people go on to find meaning and purpose, and how they find that through their faith, and it's really a future thinking kind of genre. We're all fantasy readers here as well, but definitely just not the focus right now.
So, like, obviously, plenty of made-up religions exist. Some of them even became real religions if you take L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. So where is the line for you where you say, okay, this religion is okay to include and make it Incensepunk, because I mean, I don't know whether it was done ironically or not, but there are plenty of people who wanted to get their official religion listed as Jediism or Dudism or Flying Spaghetti Monster or insert random weirdness, mostly because they think they're being like hip and cool or whatever. But where is the line in Incensepunk where you say, no, this religion doesn't qualify it as?
I don't really believe in hard lines for anything. It's all gray areas and vibes when you get into taxonomy overall anyway. But I think for a lot of it, it's just kind of how long the religions existed and what level of kind of tradition that it has. Like, we haven't been particularly interested in like exploring any pagan Incensepunks type stuff, just because there's not like much of a codified pagan religion as far as the aesthetic trappings or the liturgies or traditions or rituals or anything. Especially modern paganism tends to kind of pick from all over the world. I could be convinced with the right story if there's something that did a really particular approach of like, we're going to take some Native American pagan faiths and bring that forward. I could certainly see the argument for that kind of thing. But like I said, we just haven't seen much that's scratched the itch exactly yet. I think, it was founded on aesthetics, and it's certainly not a purely aesthetic genre, but aesthetics still feel like an important part of it. And it's almost easier to make a case for something with a strong aesthetic, even though the religion's made up, like Warhammer 40K, for example, that's got the religious aesthetic down with the Gothic arches and the skulls and relics everywhere and everything, versus a religion that we don't really have any aesthetic ties to. That's hard to visualize like that.
So
I'd say that I'd add that the foundations are what's most important. Like, the thing with Warhammer 40K is it looks amazing, but it's hollow, right? It's an empty aesthetic. There's nothing behind it. It's it's extremely cool and fun, but it's not a religion, right? I mean, people are worshiping the emperor, et cetera, et cetera. It's quite actually like anti-religious in a lot of ways. So, to give you an example of something, actually, Dark Legacy, so my series is probably the closest to what you're talking about, because it's post-apocalyptic. It's 2 apocalypses, and it's 500 years in the future, and this religion is an absolute key aspect of that series. But there's not, it doesn't have Catholic Church or Orthodox Church, but all of the very prominent faiths and faith institutions in those books are derived from real world faiths that exist today. And you see it. It's very plain to see, the traditions are there, the words are there, things have skewed and changed over time, but the foundation stones are there, right? And that's really what's important to us. Is it's not just, okay, let's have a cyberpunk story, with literal incense blowing around everywhere, and it's all goth and all like sexy and sweet. Sure, aesthetics are important, but there has to be those pivotal questions underlying it around what do these characters believe in, how does their faith affect them, what are the I talk about suffering a lot. It's like what are they going through that either cements their faith or breaks it? What these aren't preachy stories. These aren't perfect characters. They're all living through very real journeys. But there's thousands of years long traditions behind those, right?
For sure.
We talk a little bit, as a group about the sort of influences on the genre, right? And I think like Walter Miller's A Canticle for Leibowitz is, definitely one of, if not, it's one of the most.
Godfather, yeah.
It's just so well done. So beautifully integrates great storytelling and speculative futures, and sort of like authentic grappling with ethical and moral questions. But then there's also examples like Gene Wolfe, right? Your opinions may differ even in this group, but I think Gene Wolfe is a precursor to what we're trying to do in Incensepunk. And to Yuval's point, like there's not an explicit contemporary religion evident in Wolfe, but I mean, it's all there, right? I mean, you can follow the lines back, and it connects very, very clearly to in that case his Roman Catholicism.
I've got 7 more books to read before I can give you an answer on that.
You better get to it.
So that's actually gives lots of room if you try to take modern earth-based religions and apply it to sci-fi. Because like one of the great questions in the College of Cardinals in the Catholic Church, at least at one point in time, even talked about this, where that line is when you meet extraterrestrial life, are they your brothers and sisters in Christ and thus, you embrace them, etc.? Or are they non-sentient, non-sapient space cows and you can make steaks? And where that line is a very interesting question. And nobody kind of has the answer for that yet as far as from a theological standpoint. So there's definitely room to explore those kind of questions in a future world where humanity isn't alone.
Yeah, we haven't touched the alien aspect yet. It's certainly something that's something that is reflected a lot more in published works already. You've got stuff like The Case for Conscience by Blick.
That's great.
The Sparrow by Russell. Hyperion.
Kaplan's War by Torgerson.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff. I have a whole list on my Goodreads that I call Space Jesuit. It's like we meet aliens and send a Jesuit out to teach them the gospel. And there's a bunch of that stuff. We haven't touched that yet. I don't know. I don't dislike it or anything, but it starts to feel like something different. I feel like when you start involving aliens, it's where, I don't know. I'm not saying no to it by any stretch. Like I said, there's no hard lines or anything, but it's just a different vibe so far. I could be convinced. So far, I've given up a lot of ground on what I thought it needed to be anyway, because once you're exposed to something that is doing good art, it's easy to change your mind. But so far, we haven't gone there.
I know you've at least seen Space Jesuits in Declan Finn's White Ops, but I don't seem to remember there being aliens in that one. It's been a while since I read it. That would be an interesting take. I'm sure you could apply that to any other modern religion as well, because they're going to have the same kind of questions for anything earth-based. Mm-hmm. Now, do you have a preference as far as what qualifies as Incensepunk with the specific religion, or is it pretty much whatever works for the author?
No, like I said, we're not just open to other religions, but we're actively inviting other religions. Like I said, our circles, especially mine and Andrew's, is because we're Catholic, are largely Catholic and Christian, and living in the U.S., very Christian culture that we're in. So it's harder for us to break into other areas so that people know about it and are submitting. So we've got a few submissions from other faiths, but we're particularly interested in hearing from what other faiths have to add to the conversation.
So is this something you're mostly seeing with your published short fiction with your Incensepunk magazine, or are you also like publishing authors in actual proper novels, or are you just recognizing authors already publishing their own stuff?
The first and the third. We're not able to publish any novels yet. Hopefully someday, but that's, as you I'm sure know, a very different, much more complicated process than a webzine like we're doing right now.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we've seen a few submissions come in from different faiths, and hopefully we're able to get some of those published in the near future. And I don't recall if we've found any novels for sure from other religions besides Christianity and Judaism, as far as existing novels that are out there. But
would you say that Lords of Light by Roger Zelazny qualifies? I don't think we've ever talked about that one, but it's the one where humans in a distant future are on a planet in this, I'm going to butcher it, but basically the elites kind of have taken on the role of Hindu gods.
I think that I wouldn't, because the gods are like expressly fake. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of makes it a fake religion thing. It's like, that's kind of a no-go for me personally as far as fitting the label. And that's kind of what River of the Gods by something McDonald, I think, is a similar thing where it's like Hindu AI based on the Hindu gods. And it's the same kind of thing where it's like, is it really taking the religion seriously when we're claiming, when we're just making facsimiles of them? I don't think it really does it for me. It kind of depends on how it's handled, I suppose, if it's done as more of an homage. But even I read Project Pope by, I remember I'm mixing him up with someone else, Cymac or something maybe. But that one's like robots are trying to create a robot Pope. And it was like, it sounded really cool at first, but then when I figured out that they're like, oh, it's not really they're not like Catholic robots that are like, humans have given up the faith, but we're still carrying it on. It's like, oh no, they're just making up their own religion and calling it, just using the trappings of Catholicism in the same way that Warhammer 40K does.
Yeah.
So
it's funny because like so much of it is about like kind of like that tight but not touching, right? Like they're human stories. Although actually we just published a short to the zine that is a robot story, but he is a legit robot Pope. Really good story. It's stories filtered through that human experience, right? So it's not like we're seeking stories where somebody finds literally finds God, or has some indisputable supernatural experience, because at that point you've kind of gone beyond, like you're kind of into the materialism that Andrew's talking about, right? It's so much about the perspective that people have in their faiths, how that affects their journeys, and the unknown and mythology and mystery. Like in my recent novella Orders of Magnitude, it takes place in space, and it's very much about the kind of the unknown / horrors of space, like what actually lies beyond the Earth, where we have where everything exists, everything that we can conceive of exists, right? We kind of take space travel for granted and sci-fi for granted, and I love Star Trek, but like if you really start to think about it and like what it means for people to be in the void, like it's pretty terrifying. It's a pretty, and it's as hostile a place as you can imagine, right? So what are people's experiences there? What are they seeing? Like the alien question, like there's a lot of discussion around like are aliens, assuming aliens exist, are they angels, are they demons, what are they, right? Like are they some sort of expression of something that's actually on Earth, or so on and so forth? So I think that this is a very blathering way of saying that I think that the mystery and the mythology are key in these stories, rather than just like the revelation, at the end of the day.
I agree with all of that. I would say further to it that I think really good Incensepunk is about the interplay between faith and doubt. Mm-hmm. And Yuval's novels are great with this. Mm-hmm. I think it's like central theme in everything that he does. And my own perspective on it, and I know enough about Yuval's perspective just because we talk about it all the time that I know he agrees more or less, is that the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. Right? Faith is about struggling with unknown and unanswerable things. It's about an act of the will in most cases. It's about choosing to follow a light and trusting in it. It's not about to use the haters' terms, it's not about Sky Daddy showing up with flowing white hair and a long beard and flames coming out of his eyes and saying, "See, I'm here, I'm real." Mm-hmm. It's if it were, it really wouldn't be that interesting.
You leave Gandalf alone. So it sounds like it's more that the characters believe it's real and treat the religion appropriately than it is what particular religion it is. Mm-hmm. But you want the religion to...
Even the characters might struggle with their faith. And I think you'll find that in Yuval's books. You definitely will find it in my books as well. These are not characters that it's not, this is not a Deus Vult kind of genre.
Yeah, these are, to Andrew's earlier point, these are not moral tales, right?
Right.
So no passion
They're not
plays for you guys?
moralizing. They're not moralizing. I think they grapple with moral issues profoundly, but they're not lecturing people.
Yeah, they're normal humans having normal human weaknesses.
Exactly.
I think that's the beauty of speculative fiction in general, is you can grapple with those deep, hard, big questions in a way that's kind of safe, because you can kind of once remove it from your daily life. It's not me that's asking these questions. This is blue-faced alien over here, or insert orc, random fantasy creature, whatever. Do you find that engaging in the religious discussion through fiction makes it easier for people to grasp? Or are you already preaching to the choir, essentially, for people that are reading the genre?
Makes what easier to grasp?
The concepts of religion in general.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I'm not sure that's exactly what I'm trying to do in my stories.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that I have on that.
Yeah, I think it's certainly true of sci-fi and fantasy in general that it's kind of a way to get around people's defenses and help them, see things from a perspective they struggle to see it from, or get around their prejudices and stuff like that. There's a lot of famous sci-fi works that are great examples of that. But I don't think it's what we're particularly trying to do, to use sci-fi to show people anything about religion, as much as it's just stories of people who are themselves religious, because it's a part of human nature, really. At least it's been maybe not universally of every human, but it's certainly been a part of human culture for the entire known history of human culture, that we've sought something beyond the material and wondered about it and struggled with our relationship to it. And so it's science fiction that continues that struggle and continues in that thread, is really what we're doing.
It's like there's a certain species of negative review that I get every once in a while that I always get a little bit of a kick out of. And it basically comes from people who, I mean, as best I can tell, have a true allergy to any religion, anything religious. And it's like, oh my God, I thought this was going to be a sci-fi story, but this is just the author talking about his religious views. And I'm like, okay, I mean, I don't think that's what it is, but hey, it's cool. If that's what you're taking away from it, that's what you're taking away from it. But why doesn't the opposite apply, right? Like if you're writing, if you're reading sci-fi where religion is literally never discussed, there's not one word about it in 400 or 500 pages, even though this is an essential part of human identity and culture, going back to the beginning of our species, how is that not preachy? How is that not pushing an agenda? And to me, it's if you're, this is probably a ham-fisted, analogy, but it's if you're writing a story about a house and you never, ever, ever talk about the kitchen, how good is your story really going to be? Are you really talking about a house? And why are you not talking about the kitchen? I want to know about the kitchen. And the more that you don't talk about it, the more I want to know about it. I sort of think that's what we're doing here.
It's like that quote about Japanese art, how it's all defined by its relationship to Mount Fuji. Either Mount Fuji is up here in the foreground and the subject of the piece, or it's somewhere out there in the background. It's just something that you notice out there in the background, or it's not there at all and it's noteworthy in its absence, or it's not there at all because you're standing on top of it.
Yeah.
So obviously, Incensepunk is a larger umbrella term that could apply to any of the subgenres of science fiction. Is there any that you see more people writing their stories within? So I don't know, sci-fi, middle sci-fi, or sci-fi mystery, or whatever. Are there any subgenres of science fiction that you think you're seeing more stories that would slot into?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew is for sure the king of the metaphysical angle, right? And I have some of that too. And I think that that's a space that we all enjoy. I mean, if you think of Dune as a amalgamation of subgenres of all types, I think underlying all of them is the metaphysical angle and the religious angle. And I think that there's a lot of that in ours. So there's things around it. I mean, as far as the submissions we've been seeing, it's honestly been all over the place. Like I don't think there's been anything consistent, but I know that the three of us have some predilections for the metaphysical side, and also like the cool stuff too, right? I mean, sorry, I don't mean to say is the coolest. I mean,
actually cool.
The aesthetic, right? Like the cyberpunk angle, the tech thriller, the mil sci-fi piece, like the future tech is fun. I mean, it's an amazing playground to have. So there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I think partly because of the name, like obviously is a nod to cyberpunk. So we see higher representation of cyberpunk than maybe we would have otherwise. And military sci-fi is a big one for sure. There's the Warhammer influence has probably got a lot to do with that, because it's one of the inspirations. Like we've got some of the pieces on our page because it's like this, but real religion instead of mocking it. I'm trying to think. It really has been a very interesting spread of some stuff. We have some stuff hopefully coming out soon that's really like Philip K. Dick levels of out there type of sci-fi. So I'm excited at the breadth that we've seen already. Actually,
we even have comedy.
Yeah, hopefully in 2 parts soon.
So, is there anything about the hashtag, the genre, Incensepunk that you feel like we need to cover before you wrap this up?
Gosh, I feel like this has been a really good conversation. I feel like you've really covered the basics of what we're trying to do here, personally.
Okay.
Yeah, I certainly hit on everything that I expected to talk about, but I kind of leave it to you. Are there any, like, as someone from the outside, are there any questions you still have about the genre? We're happy to address them.
No, but when you told me what it was, with the Incensepunk being that nod to Warhammer 40K, I was like, oh, so it's Warhammer but with Catholics. So that's kind of what I was picking. So I'm in my head, I'm like, wait, so is the Emperor, God, King, whatever, the Pope, or actually God? And then you were like, yeah, that's not what this is. So no. I feel like you've answered the questions. I think we're good. Dear listener, when we post this, you can comment and join the conversation. And if you have questions, I will pester these fine folks on Twitter until they answer you. But they are also on Twitter, and their links will be in the show notes, so you could pester them yourself if you so desire. Follow the magazine, subscribe. Now, one of the things you mentioned on your website, I remember going through the incensepunk.com, is that right now everything is free as far as your website. So how are you funding that? And is that if someone is so inclined to want to support your magazine because this is important to them too, how might they do that?
Yeah, so the magazine's hosted on Substack. So when you subscribe, you can subscribe free. You'll get access to everything we post. Or if you want to, kind of Patreon model, if you are inclined to add on a monthly payment, $5 is our suggested monthly. You can throw that in, and if you do that, you get access to a chat room and the ability to comment on stuff. But yeah, that's mostly it. And then we get some anonymous donor funds as well to help us get our feet under us until the number of paid subscribers gets up there. But everything that comes into us goes right back out to paying authors. We're not here to make a profit. We're paying server costs and everything out of our own pockets and have no intention of ever collecting a salary off of this or anything. It's really exists because we want this to be something that we want out there. It's something that we wanted ourselves and had to make it ourselves for it to be there. So in order to keep that mission going, everything we get goes right back to paying authors. And once we start getting more, we'll start paying authors more. Once we're paying authors as much as all the big mags, we'll start doing more stories, paying artists. There's never a point where we're going to be like, okay, now we can start raking in the dough.
So in addition to the e-magazine that's published through your Substack, is there any point you're going to do like an anthology, a collection of these stories, or are you going to just keep the e-zine model?
Yeah, the plan is to do a print and ebook and annual anthology from the stories for that year.
Okay.
So yeah, that's hopefully coming around the end of the year. We started in the fall of last year, and the first few stories were just a few of us. So it'll probably be around the end of this year.
Okay. So this is the part of the interview, dear listener, dear viewer at home, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books, so it really does matter. Do your part. And if you like what they're doing, give them a holler, give them a shout. Links will be in the show notes. But before we wrap this up, we'll go in alphabetical order because I want to prove grunts can read. Andrew, how might we find you on the wild, wild interwebs?
Really, Twitter or X is the best place to find me. I'm my handle is at Andrew Gillsmith.
You're really making it easy for me. I like that.
I try.
And we will link to all of that in the show notes, to include all of the links for the Incensepunk magazine if you want to check that out. But John, how might we find you?
Yeah, I have pretty much every social media platform that's ever been created. I still have some old MySpace pages.
I was about to ask, is Tom still your friend?
He is. Yeah, and at least I have more than one MySpace page, actually. I have like 12. But yeah, I don't really log into that one. But yeah, Twitter is the biggest, or Blue Sky. If you want to reach out to me on there, that's the spot. And it's Spacey JD James on Twitter, and incensepunk.com on Blue Sky at the moment.
Okay. And Yuval, how might we find you on the wild, wild interwebs?
Yeah, I'm on a bunch, but really I mostly linger on X. So X / Yuval Kordov, and all my books are on Amazon if you should so be inclined.
Now, are your books wide as well, or are you Amazon exclusive?
Amazon exclusive, so that I can get on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, those are all going to be free for you.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you guys coming on. You can find us, a dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree / Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree / Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters, our Spotify, our Discord, our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com, for professional purposes only people. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Save all your shenanigans from Adam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, the Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section, this is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee, drink coffee till they float away on a river of coffee goodness. And if you want to get some of that Java for yourself, use the link in the show notes. Code PODCASTGRUNTS gets you 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. It's a win-win. This is not a drop shipping operation, people. Nay, they are roasting these beans in America. So you are hearing eagles sing of freedom when you drink their coffee. And with that, I would like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy and absent co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time. We'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right, thank you, Andrew, John, Yuval, for coming on. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And we'll have to have you guys come back for your individual book series too. So we'll have to see if we can get that on the books for season 5, which is this year, 2025. So we got time.
Awesome.
And with that, I'm going to hit the end button. Wait for it.